Okay, good morning. Today's Sunday. It is the 11th day of Cheshvan. Today is the yortzeit of Rachel Menu, the matriarch, Rachel, our matriarch, who is crying and protecting and praying for the Jewish children to come back from the exile. A very special day. And we are doing our part to take us out from the Gullus, take us out from the exile, and bring Mashiach, because by learning Tanya and learning Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov says the teaching of these teachings, learning of these teachings of Chassidus is what will bring Mashiach. When will you come? The Baal Shem Tov asked Mashiach, and he told him, when your teachings will be spread outside. So the more we study these teachings, the closer to Mashiach we get. So make sure to subscribe and to invite people and to forward these videos so more people will learn Chassidus. And today's shir is actually talking about the MITZVOS and the Torah that we will study and do in the time of Mashiach. It's talking about what will happen, in what way will we do those mitzvahs. And as we learned on Friday, we learned that what the Alter Rebbe explained, that when there is the Torah study that we do today, we learn the Torah, there's questions, there's arguments. Why so many arguments in the Torah? It is because it is connected with the Eitz Adas, Toivara, meaning it is the Torah that is dealing with the darkness, and it goes down to the darkness. And in the darkness, there's questions. And when we study the Torah down in here in this world, being that we are beings that are brought down, created and brought down in such a low world, in a world of darkness, we have the power of removing the cover from the light, removing and bring, by studying the Torah and clarifying the questions down here in this world, we are revealing the light of the Torah. And even as in the higher worlds, in Gan Eden and the angels, they all come here and wait for us to reveal these parts of the Torah. So this is the Torah that we study in these days before Mashiach comes. But when Mashiach comes, he says it's going to be a whole different thing. It's going to be directly the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, and we're learning from the deeper part of the Torah, the mystical part of the Torah, which is dealing directly with bringing more and more light rather than dealing with the darkness. And so this let's look inside. We're going to look inside. So let's look inside.
Okay, I'm going to go back well.
Okay, so here says the Alter Rebbe, Avol betzeisa shchina meklipas noiga. He says when the shchina will emerge from the klipas noiga, from the shells, achar sheyushlam birur anitzeitzes, veyufrad hara me'atoy v'yispodu kol peyal yoven. After the extraction of the sparks will be completed, and the evil of the klippos will be separated from the good and holiness, and all the workers of evil will be dispersed. ולא ישלט אילונה דתוי ורע בצייס התוי ממנה. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which is of the klippus nega, when this will no longer be dominant, because the good will have departed from it. And this is what we're saying, in this time, we have the mixture of the good and bad, and every time we study Torah, we do a mitzvah, we elevate the sparks, and we refine, and we separate the good from the evil, from the bad. Because in everything in the world there is good, but it's also bad. And we have to separate, and when you use the neutral things only for good things, and you separate it. Then says, what's going to be the job then after this happens? The people will engage in the study of Torah and in the observance of mitzvahs, the commandments, not in order to extract the sparks, as we do it now, but ki'im leyached yichudim el yonim yoser lehamshich oiris el yonim yoser me'atzilas. So the job then will be not to refine and to separate the good from the bad. The job will be in order to bring about the consummation of yichudim. Means unions, a marriage of the spheres, just like a marriage. When you have a marriage of male and female, the consummation brings about more creation of more beings. Same thing in a spiritual sense. We need to bring about more and more light from the higher worlds, which is endless. And the mitzvahs and the Torah that we do is a union, a consummation, which brings about and draws down, calls forth more sublime light, which is transcending Atzilus, which is high, even higher than Atzilus. As the Arizal said, and how is it done? It says, everything will be accomplished by means of the pnimius of the Torah, the inner part, the esoteric dimensions of the Torah. By performance of the commandments, the mitzvahs, with lofty mystical devotion, directed to the drawing down the sublime light from the divine luminary. Because the root of the commandments is exceedingly high in the blessed Ein Sof, which, as we said before, it's even higher than Atzilus, very high, the roots of the mitzvahs. And now the Alter Rebbe brings down, in parenthetical note, it says, and our sages tell us that in the mitzvahs will be abrogated, they'll be nullified in the future. Where does it say? The Gemara is talking about whether a dead person is allowed to be buried in shrouds that has a mixture of wool and linen, which of course a Jew is not allowed to wear, a garment that has wool and linen. And in this, the Gemara says that it's yes, you can do it. Why? Because, well, what's the problem? I mean, that person is not obligated to perform the mitzvahs, so he's allowed to wear the garments, which is as shatnez, the mixture of wool and linen. So the Gemara said the problem is what happens when Mashiach comes and the dead are going to rise. When the dead are going to rise they're going to rise and they're going to resurrect. And if they're going to have the shrouds, which is mixed of wool and linen, and this, the Gemara says, you know what? No, that the mitzvahs in the future will be nullified. So says the Alter Rebbe that this is not going to be right away, and we'll talk about it in a minute. What exactly does it mean that the mitzvahs will be nullified? Because after all, the mitzvahs are, the mitzvahs is something that stays forever. So, in any case, the Alter Rebbe here differentiates between the time of Mashiach and the time of the resurrection of the dead, which will be a later period. Continues the Alter Rebbe. Masha Amru Razal. As for the statement of our sages, the mitzvah is betelim la'asid lavai, that the commandments will be abrogated in the future. This is from the Gemara in Nida. Hainu b'schias hamesim. This refers to the era of the resurrection of the dead. Avali moisa Mashiach koidem tchias hamesim ein betelim. But in the days of Mashiach, before the resurrection of the dead, they will not be abrogated. So, velochein, and therefore, so the main part, the main occupation of the study of the Torah will be mainly directed in the pnimiyus Torah. Studying the Torah, it doesn't mean that the Talmud will not be studied. Everything stays. But they're going to be able to study the Talmud with a deeper meaning, the way they study it in Gan Eden. There's many cases, even today, there is the Rebbe's father, I believe Yitzchak, was a big Kabbalist, and he wrote many parts in the Talmud explaining what it means in a Kabbalistic terms. There's Shnaim Oich Zibetalis, for example. There is the Mishnah that talks about two people who holds a garment and they argue. This one says it's mine. The other one says it's mine. This is also explained in a way of the two sides are holding something. There is the evil side, there is the good side are holding, and the two arguments is whole deep Kabbalistic explanation what that means. Every part of the Torah can be studied in the deeper sense, the Tameim and the hidden reasons. But the revealed part of the Torah, the regular part of the Torah, to understand the halachas, the laws, all of these things, this will be known. Everyone will know it. The revealed aspect of the Torah, however, will be manifest and known to every Jew by an innate and unforgotten knowledge. It says the concept of shikha, the forgetfulness, comes from the other side, the evil. The evil covers and conceals the light. What does a person forget? Something that is not part of, that's not part of you. Something which is secondary to you. But something which is part of you, you don't forget. You don't forget to eat. You don't forget, people, things that is really, really important to you, you don't forget. So the Torah will also be known in a way that it's not going to be forgotten, the revealed part of the Torah. Only the mixed multitude will have to toil in this aspect of the Torah. Because they will not have the merit to taste from the tree of life, the Pnimiyus Torah, and the commandments. They will therefore need to engage in the Torah, in Mishnah, in order to weaken by their occupation with Torah, they will weaken the power of the Sitra Achra, the other side, that cleaves to them. Shelo tishlet bahem leachatiyam, so that it will not dominate them and cause them to sin. As it is written that the sinner at the age of 100 will be cursed. This refers to the sinners from the mixed multitude, that even then there will be those who will need to separate their evil. In addition, on the practical level, they will also need to the details ruling on the prohibitions and impurity more than the Jews. So that nothing will occur that is ritually unfit, impure, or forbidden. Since there shall not befall any sin to the righteous, meaning the people, the vast majority of the Jewish people, which will be considered part of the righteous, Amich Kulam Tzadikim, people that they will not have the contact with the evil. But those from the mixed multitude, what he calls them, they will have something still that they need to stay away from, and that's why they will need to be studying the part of the Torah that deals with the good, the bad, the evil, and so on. וגם, in addition, says the Alter Rebbe, אפשר וקורא והדבר שידעו בפנימיוס התורה כל גופי התורה הנגלס. It is also possible, and indeed probable, that Jewish people will know all the fundamentals of the revealed plane of the Torah from the pnimius of the Torah. Just like Avraham Avinu, peace be upon him. In other words, Avraham Avinu, the Torah says that he observed all the entire Torah. How did he know the Torah? The Torah was not given then yet. Because he saw the spiritual part of it. And from the spiritual part, he was able to understand that physically that's how it has to be done. And the same thing says the Alter Rebbe, that when Mashiach comes, we will know the details of the literal laws by understanding the spiritual part, the spiritual effect of it. We will see, we'll be connected with the spiritual part of the mitzvahs. They will therefore not need to occupy themselves with them, with the part of the Torah that defining the purity and the impurity and so on. But in the time of the second temple, by contrast, they needed to be involved in these laws. And not only for the practical application, but because this was the main purpose of the divine service. What was the main purpose? Is to break the evil side by studying the Torah in this part and separating the good from the evil, clarifying the questions that we mentioned. It says, Lahatish koyach sitra acha, to weaken the power of the sitra acha, of the other side, ulealois nitzotzei hakadusha al yedei Torah va'avodah, and to elevate the sparks of holiness by means of Torah study and worship. Commission is as explained elsewhere. And the Alter Rebbe continues and concludes, and it says, and after these the above words of truth, Yuvan Heitev b'toisves bio araya mehemna de la'el. It will be possible to clearly understand the earlier quoted passage from the Raya Mehemna, from the Zohar, which he spoke of the tree of good and evil, prohibition and permissions. And this part of the Zohar, you see how one small part of the Zohar needs to be clarified so well, so people don't understand it wrong, to say, God forbid, that the Torah is the tree of good and evil. The That meaning the klipas noiga, the shell, which is the neutral shell, which is the mainstay of this world, as it says in the Eitz Chaim, Mevin, and this will suffice to the discerning. So here again comes the Alter Rebbe and gives us this beautiful example of how we take a part from the Zohar, the Kabbalah, and we brings it down, the Hasidus brings it down to our level so we can understand this. Not only understand it, but we can practice, live with this. This gives us a different understanding of what it means doing the mitzvahs today. How we clarify things today, we elevate those sparks, we bring them up, and that brings us closer to Mashiach. And this is the end of Siman Chavav, chapter 26 in the Igeret Hakodesh. Thank you all for joining. Bezat Hashem will continue tomorrow. We start an all new chapter tomorrow. Any questions? We can take the questions now.